Hey guys, welcome. In this video we'll be talking about the Betty or the Betty styling guide or the coding style. So the Betty coding style was named after Frances Elizabeth Olbertin. So from the name Elizabeth you get Betty, and it is inspired by the Linus kernel coding style. So why should you use the Betty coding style? Because of consistency. It makes your code nicer, easier to look upon. It makes your code, gives more sense. It makes more sense when you look at your code. And most important, it makes your code very easy to understand when you come back to it, maybe after 2 weeks or 1 month. So you see, Betty is a coding style, and if you adhere principle to this coding style, it will make your coding life very, very easy. So, without wasting much time, how do we install Betty? So how do we get the Betty linter on our computer? So the very first step is to visit the link on your screen. So I've done that already, and if you do it correctly, you should be on a page like this. All right. So when you're on this page, you are good to go. So the first thing we do here is I open up my terminal, which I've done already. So I'm set, and I'm going to create a folder called Betty. So create a folder called Betty. That has been done. Then let's go into the folder. So you cd into the Betty folder. I've done that too. So following these instructions, so you go to Betty, okay, and now that you've created your folder, the next thing now is for us to clone the repository. So now that we are on the Betty page, let's click on this and let's copy this so that we can clone it. So we are trying to do this now. We clone this. So I created a directory called Betty. Then I went into that directory called Betty, okay, because I like to keep my files organized. And now let's clone this. So git clone. Then you paste your link. Then you wait for it to clone. And now that it has cloned, we can now go into that folder, okay. So let's check it, ls, and we have Betty now. So let's cd into this Betty folder we just got here. So cd into Betty. Okay, now we are inside of Betty. Let me clear the screen. So you can do an ls to see all the files that came with Betty. So you can see everything. These are all the files that are with Betty. The next step for us is to install. So following the instruction here, now that we've cd into the repo, we need to install the linter with sudo install.sh. okay, so we are using sudo so that we can do it as the super admin. So you say sudo dot, that is check for the file in this folder, and we are going for install.sh, and it is all set. As you can see, it has done the installation for us. We have everything and it's saying all set. So let's clear the page so we can go back up. So we are here right now. We've just installed Betty, okay, with sudo install.sh. The next step is to create a file called Betty. So I will do that with my Vim editor. So vim Betty, okay, to create the file. And I've created that file now. The next thing I will do is, let's go back here. So click on betty.sh here. Okay. Then copy everything. Copy everything. Go back to your terminal and paste. So I've done that. I've copied everything and I've pasted it inside of the Betty file. And now I should save and quit. And now that I've done that, what's the next step for us? The next step, so we've created the file and we've put in the code, okay. I've showed you where the code is. This is the code. So you get the code from here, from your Betty repository. Just click on betty.sh. This is it, all right. Then you copy this code and put it in the new Betty file. So the next step is to change the permission so that all users can access Betty. So we do that by doing chmod. All users, give them the executable permission. For which file? The file Betty. Okay, permission has been set, and now that we've set the permission, what is the next step? Now we have to move the Betty file to our bin directory. So when you move it to the bin directory, you'll be able to access it globally. Okay, so let's move it. We'll use sudo move Betty to bin. So we are using sudo so that we can do this as a super administrator. So sudo. So before I move it, let's check if it is there. So this is our file. This is Betty. This is the Betty we want to move. So let's move it. Sudo move Betty to where? To the bin directory. Okay, and let's check if it has been moved. So as you can see, Betty has been moved. On your computer, if you do this, it may ask you for a password. That is your admin password. So please install your admin, put in your admin password or the password that you use for that particular user. So I've moved Betty. Okay, and now that I've done this, we are good to go. So the first thing we can do is, let's create a quick file. Okay, so in I won't do this in the Betty folder. Let me just go back, or let's do it here. So let's create a simple C file. So I'll call this Vim. I'll call this hello.c. Okay, and I'm going to create it the way I would do it normally, the way I create my C files. So I would say, I will include the header, include, then standard input output, the way I do it normally. I will say main, so I'm just showing you the way I would have done it without Betty. Return 0. So let's print. I will print F hello world. So without Betty, this is how I would have created my file. Okay, so now I can save this file. The file is saved, and now that the file is saved, we can use Betty to check it. So let me clear. Remember, I've created the file called hello.c. So now to check this file using Betty, all I do is say Betty hello.c, and as you can see, my Betty has been installed properly, number one, and number two, Betty is showing some warning for what I've done in this file. All right, now before we correct these errors, let's understand how Betty checks for all these errors. Okay, so let's leave this and let's go back to our screen, our slide. Now that we've installed Betty and Betty is checking our file for us, Betty can check the files, Betty can give errors and warning. Let's now understand how to use Betty. So the first thing first is indentations. In Betty, indentations are actually tabs. So you use tabs to indent your code. Tab characters will be counted as one character by Betty. So that is why you have to understand that the preferred way to use multiple indentation levels in a switch statement, for example, is to align the switch like we have here. So you align the switch statements with the case on one line. And also, as it says, don't put multiple statements on a single line. Don't put multiple assignments on a single line. And Betty coding style is super simple, something like this. So if you have this, it means you shouldn't do something like this. So if you, after this if condition, you have to do this under this and do something under this. So you should have 3 lines. Now, outside of comments and documentation, spaces are never used for indentations. Do not use space for indentations. Okay, so let me put this in bold. Spaces are never used for indentations. You use what? You use tab. So this is an example of a switch code and how you can indent it properly. The next one is breaking long lines. When you are doing your coding, your lines or your characters can become so long and you have a long line of text. In Betty, you should limit it to 80 columns, okay? Or let's say 80 characters. 80 columns or 80 characters. And this is the preferred limit. Statements longer than 80 columns will be broken into sensible chunks unless exceeding 18 columns significantly increases the readability. If it does not increase the way your code can be read, do not use more than 80 columns, okay? That is it. Break all your long lines and break your strings. The next one is placing braces. This is very important. Now, it is an issue that comes up in C styling, and it is the placement of braces. So what are braces? These are braces, all right? These are your braces, your opening braces and your closing braces. And the preferred way is to put both the opening and the closing braces first. That is, this applies to all non-function statements like if, switch, for, and while. So this is how you put your braces. All your braces should be on one line, okay? The preferred way is to put both the opening and the closing braces first, all right? So you put them first and they should be on one line. Same thing we have here. So same thing we have here on the exceptions. Your exception is your do loop. So for your do loop, do while loop, you can create this like this. And also, do not use braces unnecessarily. If you have a single if statement, you don't need to use braces, just use your indentation. And also, if it's just a single if and else, you can also use your indentation instead of putting braces unnecessarily, okay? But this does not apply to conditional statements if it's in a single statement, okay? So if you have more than one statement in an if statement, you can use your braces. But if you have just one statement, you don't need to use braces. And in the do while loop, your braces do not need to be on one line. But generally, place all your braces on one line, just like what we have here, all right? The next one is placing spaces. You should use spaces after these keywords. After your if, else if, switch, case, for, while, and return keywords, there must be a space in between. So this is a table that is showing us how we can use spaces. For the if keyword, you should use spaces like this. So if space, you see it, there should be a space in between before the first opening bracket. For else if, there should also be space, okay? For your switch, there should also be a space. For case, there should be space. For your for loop, there should be spaces, just the way it is shown here. For your while loop, there should be space. For your return statement, there should be space. For your size of, there should not be space. For your type of, there should not be space. For your align of, there should not be space. And attribute, there should not be space, just as it is shown on the table. So also, do not add spaces around or inside parenthesized expressions. This example is bad. That is, when you have size of, don't put space inside of what you have inside of the parentheses, okay? Inside of what you have inside of the brackets, there should be no space. And also, when declaring a pointer data or function that returns a pointer type, the preferred use of star is adjacent to the data name or function name and not to the type name. So if you have this pointer, don't put your star just after character. No, put it before the pointer name, that is star string, all right? Also, use one space on each side of most binary and ternary operators. That is, you should use spaces after or on the side of all this. So if you have a plus, there should be spaces before and after. If there's a minus, there should be spaces and after. But don't use space after these guys. Ampersand, star, plus, minus, exclamation mark, okay, size of, type of, align of. You shouldn't use spaces after these guys. You should only use spaces after these ones. Also, for your postfix increments, okay, and the decrement operators, don't use spaces. So you should be I plus plus, I minus minus, or minus minus I, or plus plus I. No spaces, all right? And no space around the dots and the structure member operators. Also, do not leave trailing white space at the end of lines. Don't leave spaces at the end of your lines. Naming. In naming, maybe for variables, global variables which are used or to be used only when you need them, they need to have descriptive names, just like global functions. If you have a function that counts the number of active users, you should call it that. So if it's counting active users, call it count active users, or you can do a short form, count user. Or you shouldn't call it this, it should be descriptive. Count active users, not something like this that no one would understand. And for local variables, they should be short and to the point. So if you have a random integer loop counter, it should probably be called I, like in your for loop. Calling it loop counter is not productive if there is no chance that it will be misunderstood. So if you use I in a for loop, we know that it is a variable, all right? Similarly, temporary can be used, or TMP can just be any type of variable that is used to hold a temporary value. That is, when you name something TMP, it is temporary, so we would understand. So your global and your local variable names must or should be descriptive so that you can understand what value they are referring to. For functions, functions should be short and sweet, and they should do just one thing. Your functions should do just one thing, and all your function codes or statements should fit on 40 lines. And like we said, they should do just one thing and do that very well. So the maximum length of a function is actually inversely proportional to the complexity and the indentation level of that function. Another measure is the number of local variables. You shouldn't have more than 10 local variables in a function, or it means you're doing something wrong. So rethink the function and make the function smaller, or your variables smaller. Also, a human brain can only keep track of about 7 different things at a time before it gets confused. So try to keep your functions very short. And how do you document your functions? Okay, so when you create functions, you want to let people know what they do. So to document a function, you simply need to insert a comment block above it. So instead of a regular C multi-line, the comment block must begin with the following line. So / ***. So this is how you document your function. Then you give the function name, a short description on single line. Then if there are parameters, you put the parameters, and you can give a longer description and also the return value. Okay, like this example below. So, commenting. Never try to explain how your code works in the function, okay? It is better to write the code so that the working is obvious. Like, it is a waste of time to explain a badly written code. So, generally, you want your comments to tell what your code does, not how. So, you explain what your code is doing, not how it is doing it. And also, try to avoid putting comments inside of a function. If a function is so complex that you need to put comments inside of it to separate it, then break it. And you should make small comments to note or warn about something particular, okay? Though it is not beautiful, it makes it ugly, but don't try to overdo this. Now, instead, put comments at the end of the function, telling people what it does and possibly why it does it. When commenting your functions, please use the Betty documentation style. Betty style for comments is the C89 style. That is, use this for comments. When you want to do comments in Betty, don't use this guy, the double /. Use this to make comments in Betty. And also, the preferred style for long multi-line comments in the head of a function is this. So this is how you put your long comments in Betty. For macros and enum, you have to ensure that you have to avoid the following. macros that affect the control flow. You should avoid such macros. Okay, macros that depend on having a local variable with a magic name should be avoided. Forgetting about precedence, macros defining constants using expressions must enclose the expression in parentheses. Beware of similar issues with macros using parameters. Namespace collision when defining local variables in macros resembling functions. So in the Betty styling code, these are what you should try to avoid when using macros and enums. Header files in Betty. The function prototypes. All your function prototypes must be declared in the header file. So before you create your function, there should be a function prototype and it must be declared in the header file. So something like this. This prototype has to be declared in the header file. So you have this function prototype. This is a simple function called sample func, which returns the value of void and takes in a parameter of int. For structs, enum, and union definitions, all your structs, enums, and unions must be defined also in the header files. All your type definitions must be defined in the header files too. Double inclusion. To prevent double inclusion, we expect you to protect your header file by defining a macro only if the header file hasn't been included yet. Example for a file name, sample header.h. Alright? Now, before we go back to our editor to fix these issues, we need to edit our test editors, okay? So if you are using Vim, just follow me right now. So if you're using Vim, let's clear, we'll come back to this. If you're using Vim, create this file called Vim RC. And how do you create it? Just type in VIM. So this symbol, I try to remember the name sometimes, but I forget it. So it's called a tilde, okay? So a tilde is called a tilde like this, tilde, that's the name of the symbol. So tilde /.vimrc. So it's going to create this file in your home directory and open it up. I have it already, so I'm not going to press enter. But if you don't have this file, please press the command on your screen if you want to do this for Vim editor, VIM editor, VIM tilde /.vimrc, then enter. When this file is created, the next thing is you open it up. Okay, mine is created already, so if yours is not created, it will be created, but mine has been created, so if I press enter, it will open it directly. And now that it is open, this is the configuration that you need. Okay, so if you do this configuration, it's going to set your tab width to 8. So anytime you use tab, it will be 8. It will give you auto indent. It will also give you smart indentation, and it will also set the new line indentation. It will enable syntax alighting, and it will set number. So you will have these guys, and it will also set the column number to 80. So you will have this red guy. So anytime I type anything up to this red line, it means I've typed 80 columns. Okay, so I should not exit this red. I should not exit this red line. So just type this code that you can see in your VIMRC file, okay, and save it. And when you save it, restart your VIM editor. So I'm going to quit out of this now. And if you are using Emacs, we will do the same thing. So for Emacs, all we need to do is to type this command. So for Emacs, just do this. Emacs tilde, okay, /.emacs. If you don't have this file before, it will be created, and if you have it, it will just open it up. So open it. I have it already, and if you can see the configuration on my screen, please type it the way it is on your own screen too, on your Emacs file. Okay, so type all this. I'm also going to put this in the description or in the comment section. So type it, okay, just the way it is here. This is the same code I have here too. So if this one is not very visible for you, you can type this, or I'll put it in the comment section so that you can copy it. So as you can see, when you do all this, it will change the way your Emacs works. As you can see, mine now has line number. Okay, mine has line number, and when you type, it ensures that you don't go beyond 80 characters. Okay, so type all this, do this. Okay, and if you've done all this, you can save and exit out of Emacs. Okay, I'm also going to put this code for the one for VIM and the one for Emacs in the description or in the comment section, so we can exit. All right, so these are the codes to set your Vim editor, your VIM editor, and your Emacs editor, so that it will work properly with Betty. You don't have to make so many changes. Now let's go back to our file and fix the issue. So we do Betty, so Betty can check our file hello.c, and let's see what Betty is saying. So Betty is saying that our function int main should not be like this, but it should contain void, so tell it that it is void. Opening brace following function declaration should go on the next line. Can you take note of that? Code indents should use tabs where possible, and no spaces at the start of a line. Okay, please, no spaces at the start of a line. Same thing, code indents should be where tabs are possible. Parentheses are required on a return statement. Okay, so let's fix this file now, and let's see if we can get Betty to give us thumbs up. So vim loc. So the first thing I would do here is, let's create a comment. So our function is main, so let's say main. This is the function name, and what does it does? It prints hello world. Then the next thing is the return, remember, and what does it return? Returns 0. So let's close the comment and we are out of it. Now the next thing Betty told us, Betty said that we should not leave it like this main, we should put void inside of it. So void. Betty was also complaining that we should not have space, so take the space out, and that the brackets should be on a new line, so we have to drop it. Okay, now it is on a new line. Betty said we should not use space. Okay, so I'm going to delete all the space I have here, and I'm going to use a tab. That's what Betty requires. Betty said we should not use space here too. Okay, so I've deleted the space and I've just used a tab. Betty also says that we should put this inside of a bracket, and I've done that now. So let's go back and see what Betty would say with the corrections that we've done. Save, and I've made some corrections, so let's do it again. Betty hello.c, and as you can see, there are new issues here. So we've been able to reduce it from 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 to 1 2 3 4. So these are warnings. Warnings can be ignored, but errors must be solved. So Betty said code indents should use tabs where possible. So we have to go back in and fix it. So let's go back. So we are here. Let's take out this line. There's nothing there to avoid confusing Betty. Okay. So because of the error, I'll probably just have to type this again, because Betty is not happy with it. So you see why you have to do the configuration. Once it is done, then from the beginning, your code will just start working properly. right, so now let me print. That's the auto indentation that is working for us now. Hello, and I'll say Betty. Let me say hello to Betty. Hello, Betty. Then the return, Betty says we should have to put it inside brackets, 0. And that's all. We put the last curly brace, and let's save this. And let's confirm again from Betty. So let me clear, so we go up. So Betty, hello.c. So code indent should use tabs where possible. Let me just check that. I know I use tab anyways. Wait, let me exit. Let me clear the screen. Okay. So let's go back into the file. All right. So let's get back our errors. So we say Betty hello.c. Okay, so these are the errors. So let's go in and edit this file to ensure that these errors are gone. So hello.c. So the first thing I would do now is, our main is correct, but our return should start with a capital letter R and it should end with a semicolon. Okay, so return 0. Take note of that. Then the next thing is, we were having issues with the lines. Okay, so let's go in here and I'm going to delete this line, and instead, you see, now it is a tab, or let me delete it, bring back that. Then I'm going to use a tab. Then I'll come down here. You see, it was a space, and turn that to a tab. So I think that should be it. So let's see what Betty says to us now. So I would run this betty.hello.c, and as you can see, from having all these errors to having no error anymore. So Betty is good, the file name is hello.c, and the function inside is main. And as you can see, there are no more errors here, no more warnings, nothing. Everything looks fine. So that is that on Betty, or using Betty to style your codes. And if you don't understand anything, you can always go back to the previous part of this video to understand the explanations I made, and you can check the documentation for further understanding. So guys, that is it on Betty styling code. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.